Good evening. SWACO is pleased to introduce you to our new monthly webinar series from Waste to Resources, where we help you hone your recycling, composting, and waste diversion skills, and we'll answer your waste and recycling questions. Tonight is the first edition of this new series, and tonight's webinar is called Recycle Right, where we're going to learn what can and can't be recycled in your residential curbside and drop-off programs. We're also going to get a behind-the-scenes look into the sorting process at Rumpke's recycling facility. We have over 100 people registered for the webinar, and it looks to me like quite a few of you have logged in, so we're very excited to be with you tonight to talk about recycling. I do want to clarify one important point before we get too far into the presentation. Tonight's webinar is focused on recycling in SWACO's jurisdiction, which is Franklin County, Ohio. If you're from outside of the county, the information we're sharing about how to recycle is specific to Central Ohio. It may be applicable to your local area, but you'll want to confirm this with your local community, your local solid waste management district, or your recycling service provider to be sure. I want to start by making a couple of introductions. I've already indicated that my name is Andrew Booker, and I'm the programs manager at SWACO. I'm only here to get us started this evening. Most of tonight's presentation will be given by Amy Densborn, SWACO's education specialist, and Guyanne McCarrion, the communications manager at Rumpke Waste and Recycling. We have a pretty simple agenda for tonight's webinar. We're going to learn a little bit about SWACO and the programs and services that we offer. We're also going to learn a little bit about what is in our waste stream, which is just a fancy way of saying what is in the trash and recyclables that we generate. We're also going to see how recycling works in Rumpke's recycling facility. And most importantly, we're going to learn how to recycle right, meaning we're going to learn what can and can't be recycled in your curbside and drop-off programs. Finally, we're going to answer your questions about recycling and waste diversion. This brings me to a very important point. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll have time for your questions. All of the participants tonight are muted, so we will not be able to hear what you say. If you'd like to ask a question, you'll need to use the chat feature on this webinar. If you've never participated in one of these before, I'm going to draw your attention to two things. First, somewhere on your screen, you'll see a control panel, typically on the right-hand side of your screen. If your control panel has collapsed, you'll see a small gray box, as indicated on the presentation slide, with a couple of icons and an orange arrow at the top. If you click on that orange arrow, it will open up the control panel. Once it's opened, you'll see a number of options, and one of them is chat. If you open that chat feature, there'll be a little box that you can ask your question, and we'll be monitoring this chat feature all night long, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll be able to answer them. I'll point out one other thing. You should also see above the chat a handout. It's called it doesn't show on this slide, but there's a little feature called handouts, and if you open that, there's a PDF version of this presentation that you can download as well. Finally, the only other thing to mention is that this presentation is being recorded, and we'll post it on our website after it's all over with. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about SWACO. SWACO stands for the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. We were created in 1989 as a result of a state law that requires all counties in Ohio to be part of a solid waste authority or solid waste management district. As a solid waste authority, we're required to assure that the waste generated in Franklin County is managed in a responsible fashion and to assure that we have adequate landfill capacity for the waste that must be landfilled. Most importantly, we're required to develop and implement programs to divert materials from landfill disposal and into more sustainable uses such as recycling and composting. As a result, SWACO offers a wide variety of programs and services to Central Ohio residents, communities, and businesses. I don't have time to cover all of them, but I'll try to touch on a few. The images on this slide represent some of our programs. For example, SWACO works with virtually all of our 41 Franklin County communities to help them establish and improve their curbside recycling programs. As an example of this, we recently created a recycling cart grant program that allows communities to purchase recycling carts at a significant discount from the normal cost. Through this program, Reynoldsburg, Gahanna, Westerville, Bexley, and Blendon Township were recently able to provide recycling carts to improve their curbside recycling programs. For those that don't have access to curbside recycling, and even those that do, SWACO also provides free recycling through our recycling drop-off locations, over 50 of which are publicly available throughout Franklin County. We also sponsor free yard waste composting for Franklin County residents. We help communities recycle electronic waste and provide free household hazardous waste disposal for residents, something that we'll talk about later in the presentation. We collaborate with law enforcement to reduce illegal dumping, like illegally disposed scrap tires, through our Environmental Crimes Task Force. And we do operate the Franklin County landfill, where we offer landfill tours, which provide a great opportunity to educate students and residents about what happens when people don't recycle. Last year, over 4,000 students participated in a landfill tour, where they also got an in-depth education about recycling presented by Amy Densmore. We also provide assistance to organizers of public community events through our container loan program, which allows events to borrow recycling containers to support event recycling. And finally, we provide a lot of public education about recycling and similar subjects through activities like our presentation tonight. More information on all of these programs is available on our website, which is swaco.org, swaco.org. That's a lot of information for one slide. But now that you know a little bit about SWACO, I'm going to turn things over to Amy Densmore to teach us more about the importance of recycling right. Take it away, Amy.
I was muted. Thank you, Andrew. As a community and residents, businesses alike, we're creating more waste every single year. Over the past several years, Central Ohio has been experiencing population growth and a booming economy. As more people move to Columbus, Ohio, more of that waste ends up in our local landfill. Even though more waste is going to the landfill, our rates of recycling and composting are increasing yearly. And the even better news is that more and more material is being diverted through reuse, recycling, and composting. In fact, in 2018, we reached an all-time record high recycling rate of 50%. Pretty impressive considering that a national average is right at 34%. If you had to give an educated guess, how much waste do you think the Franklin County landfill accepts on a daily basis? For those of you who have been on a landfill tour, you should know this one. Please enter your best guess in the chat box, and we will have Andrew report which one was the most popular response. Do we have any guesses? Well,
I had to unmute myself, Amy. So, Amy, I don't see any guesses yet. So why don't you tell us the answer?
Yeah, so the answer is 4,000 tons per day of wasted materials come to the Franklin County Sanitary Landfill. Why do we choose the terminology of wasted materials instead of simply calling it trash? Those materials going into the landfill have value and could have been recovered in current recycling markets. Those wasted materials are equal to the weight of 800 African gray elephants. Or if you're like me and haven't been around an elephant recently, it's also equivalent to about 26 Toyota Priuses catapulting into the landfill. Another way to think about this is the landfill receives about 500 trucks a day dumping materials generated by businesses and residents in our county. Last year, the landfill received 1.2 million tons of wasted materials. You may wonder, where does all this material come from? Almost 60% comes from the commercial sector, which basically means anywhere away from a single-family home, such as restaurants, businesses, and schools. Over the past few months, the amount of waste coming from the commercial sector has declined because of the COVID-19 pandemic. These businesses aren't in operation and therefore aren't producing trash. Whereas the residential sector has increased because we're all spending more time than ever at home. Here's our next question. What percentage of materials currently being landfilled do you think could have been recycled or recovered in Franklin County? If you have a guess, please go ahead and type it in the chat box.
And Amy, actually people are using the question box, it looks like, as opposed to chat. Oh. That's why I couldn't find their answers the last time. So
perfect. So what kind of answers are we getting, Andrew?
I see 70%. I see 75%. Courtney thinks it's 55%. EJ Evans, 90%. Why don't you tell us the answer?
Yeah, so you guys were pretty close. It's actually right at 76%. 76% of the materials could have been diverted through recycling and composting, which is equal to about $23 million on the commodities market. We have an amazing opportunity to increase recovery of these materials through increased access and education. Because waste streams change over time, as new products and technologies are introduced into the marketplace, it's important to take an audit of what types of materials are coming to the landfill. SWACO recently completed a waste characterization study to gain insights into what residents and businesses are throwing away. What we found is that we're throwing a lot of food and cardboard in the trash instead of composting or recycling it. We don't have time to get into all 10 of these categories today, so I'm just going to highlight the top 2 categories with you. The top 2 categories equate to about 25% of the waste stream. For those of you interested in diving deeper into the results of this study, please go to swaco.org and navigate to the reports section. You may be surprised to see that food scraps are the #1 contributor at 15% of the total waste stream. Every day, Central Ohioans are landfilling nearly 1 million pounds of food scraps. The Central Ohio Food Waste Initiative, or COFWI for short, is gathering partners, building plans, and taking action to recapture food to be a force for good in our communities. And they have set a goal to cut food waste in half by 2030. Corrugated cardboard ranks pretty high on the list at 10% of the waste stream. With online shopping and Amazon Prime becoming the preferred method of shopping, we're missing out on a big opportunity to recycle all those cardboard boxes. As you can see, a lot of the materials on this list that come to the landfill, they could have been recovered through current recycling and composting programs. And at SWACO, we're working hard to build out our diversion programs and provide grant funding to recover those materials and keep them out of the landfill. SWACO has established a long-term goal of reaching a 75% diversion rate by 2032. We can all work together to reach our goal by recycling right. Now is the time we can make a difference. With that being said, I want to turn it over to Rumpke to discuss more about their company and what types of materials are accepted for recycling at the Columbus Materials Recovery Facility. Take it away, Guyana.
Thank you, Amy. So a little bit about Rumpke. Our company was founded in 1932, and it was actually a coal delivery business. Initially, customers bartered with sheep and chickens and even hogs, because during that time, not everyone could afford to pay for coal. So eventually the business transitioned to a hog farm. And shortly after that, it transitioned to a waste collection business because, customers became accustomed to having their trash collected by Rumpke. The Rumpkes would collect the trash to feed the hogs because during that time, trash was mostly food scraps and some metal and some rags, but we didn't have the packaging that we have today. Currently, Rumpke is still family owned and operated, and one of the largest family owned and operated waste haulers in the country. We have 3,200 employees and an award-winning operation. We have 14 landfills, 11 recycling facilities. We touch parts of Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia. We also have a one-of-a-kind glass processing plant in Dayton, Ohio, and annually we recycle about 1 billion pounds of material. Now, I'd like to show you a video of how one of our material recovery facilities operate. This one is located in Cincinnati, but we have one that's very similar right here in Columbus, Ohio. Now, Brad touched on our material recovery facility, and the operation is, it really is a combination of people and machines that makes it successful. We have advanced technology like infrared lights, magnets, and conveyor belts, where we sort recyclables by type. And again, it really is important to have people and machines working together to make the process successful. So as Brad mentioned, we collect your single stream recycling, which means you can put all of your recycling into one container. That wasn't the case before. You know, back in the 90s, you had to separate your material by type. Today, because we have single stream recycling, we've seen participation rates go up quite a bit because it's a matter of convenience. You can put everything in one container, and our operation is set up to sort that material for end users. The biggest question we get is, what can I recycle? And really, we like to break this down into 5 categories. There are 5 categories of material that you can recycle in your workplace, a residential curbside, or in Swaco drop boxes. So those 5 categories are plastic bottles and jugs, cartons, glass bottles and jars, metal cans, and paper, paperboard, and cardboard. The biggest question we get is always about plastic. So what we're looking for is bottles and jugs. We're collecting plastic where the base is larger than the neck. The reason we do that is because, you know, Rumpke is a processor. We collect the material, we sort it, but ultimately we need end users to make something out of that material. And the market really dictates that we need blown mold plastic, which is plastic that has a base that's bigger than the neck. And that would be anything like a water bottle, a pop bottle, your shampoo or toiletry products, milk jugs, or laundry detergent containers. Really, if you can call it a bottle or a jug, that's the plastic that we want. Metal cans. So what we're looking for with metal is we want aluminum, steel, or tin cans. We can't accept things like pots and pans or license plates or scrap metal because our machinery is not set up to process that kind of material. Now, you can recycle scrap metal, just not at our facility. So if you have a curbside program or a Swaco drop box, that scrap metal does not belong in those containers. Glass bottles and jars. As I mentioned, we have a glass processing plant located in Dayton, Ohio. And with that plant, we divert anywhere from 50 to 60,000 tons of glass from landfills annually. That glass is turned into fiberglass insulation or back into glass containers. And with glass, we will accept all colors, including clear. We just need it to be a glass container from food or beverage, nothing like dishware or mirrors or windows. Cartons, and when we say cartons, we mean aseptic containers. So this would not include egg cartons. This would be things like cartons from broth or plant-based milks or juices. And we ask that you please remove the caps and straws when you recycle your cartons. Paper products, including cardboard. So cardboard and paper is pretty important right now, especially cardboard. As Amy, as you mentioned, you know, people are buying a lot more things online, and with online shopping being so prevalent, we're using a lot of cardboard, and recycling that cardboard is important now more than ever because we want to be able to take that cardboard and turn it back into cardboard boxes without having to use new resources. So things like we get a lot of questions about, for example, pizza boxes. You know, pizza boxes are recyclable as long as they don't have too much cheese or sauce or grease in them. Sometimes, you know, we also say evaluate the lid versus the bottom of the pizza box, because, you know, if the lid is clean, we encourage you to rip off the lid and recycle the lid, because at least you're recycling some parts of the cardboard. Now, what's really important to note too is food waste of any kind is a contaminant for us. So, you know, if you have a half full jar of pasta sauce, we ask that you please empty out that jar. We'll gladly take that glass jar, but we don't want the pasta sauce. So those are the 5 categories that you can recycle. There are some things that we cannot accept, and in fact, they are pretty harmful to our operation. Things like plastic bags, while you can recycle them by taking them back to your grocery store, they just don't belong in our programs because, as you saw in the video with Brad, we have a lot of machines that have wheels and gears, and those plastic bags get caught in our machines, causing us to have to stop operation to cut the bags out of the machines, and really it hinders the process. Other things that get caught in our machines, we call that category tanglers. That would be anything like textiles, which we've seen a spike of textiles coming through our plant, things like blankets, sheets, clothing of any kind. And also things like garden hoses, dog leashes, chains, those types of material get caught in our machines, and again, we have to stop the process. You know, we encourage with textiles or other household items to see if there's an outlet where you might be able to donate those items. Additionally, things like propane tanks or helium tanks can be recycled at hardware stores, or you can actually get them filled again for much cheaper than purchasing a new one. We've seen a lot of VHS tapes come through our facility recently. You know, maybe folks are getting rid of the old and with the new. We've also seen wire hangers, and as I mentioned earlier, pots and pans, license plates. We really don't want those items in the plant. Now, something that we don't want in recycling or trash containers is batteries. In our plant, you know, batteries can cause fire, and while recycling is very important to us, the #1 priority will always be the safety of our people. So we want to keep them safe. And with lithium-ion batteries, as soon as those crack, they're just a ticking time bomb to start a fire, and we don't want them in our recycling facility. We don't want them on trash trucks either, but we really want to make sure that those stay out of recycling facilities and our plant. Now, Amy, I know you'll touch on this later, but what you can do to dispose of batteries is take them to your local solid waste district, where you know you'll touch on that later. But if you're not in Franklin County, find your local solid waste district, and they will direct you on how to dispose of hazardous items. Now, we've talked about the process. We take the material, we collect it, we bring it into our facility, we sort it, and we turn it into bales. Now, these bales are up to 2,000 pounds per bale, and what ends up happening is we ship them to end users. End users like Pratt Paper, located right here in Ohio, is able to take that mixed paper or that cardboard, and they can turn that cardboard back into cardboard boxes, or they can take that paper and turn it into pulp, which will eventually become facial tissue or paper towels or toilet paper, which everybody wants. So the end users are really, it's important to note, again, we are a processor. So end users, we need end users to do something with the material, which is why we have the 5 categories of material that we collect, because those 5 categories have an end user. And, you know, for us, it's really important to be transparent. So if we're saying that we accept these items in our MRF, then we are recycling those particular items. So communication is really important to us to make sure that, you know, we're transparent with what we're collecting and what's happening to your recyclable material. And one more thing I'll note, and Amy, you're going to touch on this now, is, you know, recycling is great for our planet, and it's you know, we're using resources and reusing resources, but really recycling is also important to our local economy. 98% of our end users are domestic, which means they're right here in the United States, and 80% of our end users are located in the Midwest and in Ohio. So, so because we're able to have a regional operation, that stimulates the local economy. And Amy, I think you're going to talk about that next.
Thank you, Guyana, for sharing all that helpful information about Rumpke. We are fortunate to have Rumpke as a Central Ohio recycling processor, and it is a great example of how recycling does create jobs. We all know recycling is good for the environment, but did you know that it also creates a more resilient economy? In Central Ohio, the recycling industry supports 372 businesses and 5,000 employees, totaling $1.3 billion in annual revenue. For every one job in the landfill sector, there are 10 jobs in the recycling industry. Before we dive into all your recycling questions, I wanted to briefly highlight a couple of useful tools for hard to recycle materials. For all your other questions about appliances, light bulbs, or electronics, refer to our website, recycleright.org, to figure out how you can keep those valuable resources out of the landfill. We have a new recycling and reuse search tool, which includes over 300 locations to donate, compost, recycle, and safely dispose of a range of items that you know don't belong in the trash or the recycling bin. If you are moving or doing some spring cleaning, please use this tool. The majority of the items you no longer want can be diverted from the landfill. You just have to know how. Or if you don't want to get online and go on the search tool, please email us at info@swaco.org or give us a call during regular business hours. We'll be happy to point you in the right direction. Another useful SWACO program that Andrew and Guyana touched on was our household hazardous waste permanent facility or drop-off. This is a free program to all Franklin County residents. It's located near the Ohio State Fairgrounds off of East 8th Avenue. Please ensure you double check the hours of operation before you go visit the facility. And ensure, we always recommend that you call ahead to make sure they will accept your material. SWACO also partners with communities to co-host mobile collection events. There will be 2 more mobile collection events offered in September this year for those of you who might find those locations more convenient than the permanent drop-off facility. There's a long list of acceptable materials. They can be found on our website. That's just a brief overview of the ones on the slide. Basically, the rule of thumb is if the labeling contains any words such as poison, danger, caution, flammable, corrosive, or used in a well-ventilated area, then it most likely should be disposed of at our household hazardous waste location. And now we will turn it over to Andrew to start fielding some of your recycling questions.
Thank you, Amy. I've been getting some great questions while you've been giving it, both of you have been giving your presentation. I would like to remind you, I see that Kathy, Linda, and Lori have their hands raised. You guys have been using your technology well here. That's not a feature that we can unmute you. So if you'd like to ask a question, please jump onto that questions box and shoot us a question. I've got a lot of good ones. I want to start out with a question from Douglas Calum. Douglas actually was nice enough to email us a couple questions before the presentation started, and he's got a couple good ones. I want to send the first one over to Guyana. Guyana, Douglas asks, why don't we use the resin codes number 1 and 2 to communicate, educate consumers regarding what is and isn't recyclable?
Right. So, we like to stay away from using those numbers because they can be deceiving. While, for the most part, we do collect ones. Some of those are not recyclable. We're looking for blown mold plastic, which again is plastic that has a wider base than the neck. And the reason being is plastics melt at different melting points, and our end users need the kind of plastic that's blown mold, that's going to melt at a certain melting point. So we like to stay away from numbers because they can be deceiving. And there are some programs, some outlets that collect other types of plastics. Those are just niche programs, and they don't belong in our program, in our material recovery facility. So we want to be forthcoming with communication when we talk about that.
Thank you, Diane. I have another one for you.
Okay.
And again, this is from Douglas. I think it's a good, relevant question. He asked, is there still a viable market for paper and cardboard recycling?
I'm sorry, is it a viable market for paper and cardboard?
Yeah, for paper and cardboard recycling.
Yeah, so actually paper and cardboard is needed now more than ever. Again, we're buying more things online now more than ever. We were already experiencing what we call the Amazon effect, where online shopping was extremely prevalent. Now with everything happening with COVID-19, we're seeing even more, we're seeing spikes in online shopping and even more cardboard that is coming through. So we want to capture that cardboard as much as possible. And like I said, paper, we want to recycle that paper because we have paper mills right here in Ohio that are ready to take that paper and turn it into, things like paper towels and toilet paper. So paper and cardboard is, it's pretty important to recycle, especially now.
Thank you, Guy. And I've got another one, I think, kind of similar to that. The question is, what about mail and letters and envelopes? Can that be recycled?
Yes, absolutely. We will gladly take your junk mail. And I get questions about the little plastic window in junk mail. That's absolutely fine. We'll take that. We'll take your newspapers, magazines. We'll even take books, just not hardback books. So yeah, we'll absolutely take that from you gladly.
Thank you, Guy. I'm going to stick with you because most of these are going to land in your area of expertise. And Kenneth Adams asked, how much of what is put in recycling should have been put in the trash?
So that's a good question. We have about a 15% contamination rate in our Columbus MRF, and like I mentioned, really food waste is a big one, and just making sure that things like scrap metal, like textiles, those don't belong in our program. We want to make sure that we're not seeing that come through our facility because, like I said, it can halt the process. So it's about 15%.
Thank you. I want to thank Regina Starlett for one of the earlier questions. It was a good one. I want to ask a question from Ellen Buscemi, I think her name is. What about cardboard egg cartons?
Cardboard egg cartons, depending on what kind, it gets touchy with egg cartons because for the most part, they're not recyclable. There are some that are sourced by local farmers that potentially could be, but really if it's styrofoam or if it's plastic, it's not recyclable.
I have so many questions. It's really great.
I can't wait.
I have a couple different people asking about lids on both glass jars and plastic bottles.
So lids on plastic bottles, if you could just screw them back on and throw your plastic container back into your recycling cart, that's great. With glass, if you could please put the lid separate from the glass jar into your container. The bigger lids for like pickle jars and pasta sauce containers and jars like that, we're able to capture those.
Thank you. What about A deodorant spray can that be recycled?
It can, as long as it's empty and you break the tip off, the plastic tip off.
There's a really good one here. Let me find it, from Ann Richards. She says, many people recycle every food box. What is the rule of thumb for, I assume what she's talking about is takeout food containers. What's the rule of thumb for takeout food containers?
So, I touched on food waste. Takeout food containers often have contamination in them. So we really ask that you look to see if if the food container has any contamination in it. And again, if it has food in it, for the most part, it probably is contaminated. But what you want is cardboard. So any paper product, any kind of cardboard, like a good example would be, like a frozen dinner, the cardboard containers from your lean cuisine, those are recyclable. The little plastic tray is not.
Thank you. I'm getting several questions about composting. Where do I get information on composting? Amy, can you answer that one?
Absolutely. So when it comes to composting, we have a compost at home backyard sort of infographic on our website that gives you the quick how-to guide of the types of materials to put in the compost, do's and don'ts, and then the different types of systems. So whether that be a vermicomposting with worms, or a backyard tumbler, or even a pile if you're interested. So that can be found on our website. And another really great resource that we always try to promote is the Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District. They have a community backyard rebate program where they will actually provide you with a $50 rebate towards the cost of a compost bin. And that's a program that SWACO sponsors. We work very closely with them. You have to take a quiz online and then pass the quiz, and then you can receive a $50 rebate in the mail that you can put towards your brand new compost bin.
Thank you, Amy. That's great. I'm actually going to take a shot here at a couple of these questions. I've got a question here about, it says, I've heard that only a small percentage of material actually gets recycled and the rest goes into the landfill. What percentage actually gets recycled? You answered that essentially. About 85% of the material that is collected gets recycled. And as both Amy and Diana have mentioned, there are really good, strong markets here in Ohio and in the Midwest that Rumpke is able to sell these materials to. There's another one. Here's a good one for Amy. Why do I have to flatten cardboard boxes? What about the packaging tape on the box? That's kind of one for both of you there.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it first, because I have a teenager at home who doesn't like to flatten the boxes and takes up all the space in my recycling bin. So really it's helpful to flatten the cardboard boxes to maximize your volume and your space in your recycling bin. And then that even goes for once the bin has been picked up and it's being transported via truck to Rumpke, having those boxes flattened out just saves space in the truck, makes it easier for it to be transported. And when it comes to the tape, correct me if I'm wrong, Diana, but the tape can be left on. It has the ability at the paper pulp facility to be strained out and removed. And so labels and tape and things of that nature really aren't as big of a deal as we might think. Every little bit that you can do to help the recycling industry, they like that. But if you do leave a little bit of tape or a label on it, that's okay.
That's absolutely correct, Amy. Perfect answer.
Thank you, both of you. I want to repeat just a couple of things because I've got some messages here that people couldn't hear some of the answers. The question about envelopes and those little windows on the envelope, you can just leave those in the envelope. The whole envelope can be recycled, so you don't have to worry about those little clear windows in your envelope. The other question I had, the other comment that somebody made is that one of our future webinars, like we're doing tonight, will be focused on food waste and composting. And so we'll be able to provide those of you that asked for information about composting, maybe you can join us again at a future webinar and learn a little bit more about composting. Okay, here's a good one. Now it's getting deep. So what about those holiday cookie or popcorn cans? Can those be recycled?
I think they're referring to those tins that folks put cookies in. No, those actually don't belong in our program. Again, we're not set up to collect those particular items, but you can always repurpose them or donate them or potentially do some fun crafts reusing them. So one idea that we saw during the holidays was taking those tins and painting them with your kids and making little treasure chests for them. So finding creative ways to repurpose that material would be my suggestion.
What about aluminum foil? Rita Hader asks.
So pie containers or aluminum foil, we can recycle that. It's a matter of food waste. Again, we don't want to have any food waste on that material because the food waste really renders it not usable. So we just want to make sure that that material is clean and clear.
All right. There's a question here from Kenneth Adams. Is gas from the landfill still being used for commercial vehicles? Amy, why don't you talk about the landfill gas program?
I'd be happy to. So the landfill gas that's produced is actually being captured, and it is being converted to natural gas, and it's sold to Columbia Gas to power over 5,000 homes every single day. So that gas is not being used as CNG to fuel our fleet, but instead is being sold to the Columbia Gas utility, and it's powering people's homes right locally near Grove City.
Thank you. I have a very important question from Kim Mullaney. It's probably a two-part question here. I've heard that I need to cover the ends of household batteries before putting them in for recycling. Is that true? Let me start with Diane. Tell us about household batteries and whether they belong in your curbside program or your drop-off program.
So batteries actually are very hazardous for our material recovery facilities. Batteries, as soon as they're cracked, are essentially a ticking time bomb, and they end up causing fires in our plants. And as I've mentioned, we want to recycle as much as possible, but the safety of our employees comes first. We sometimes recover anywhere from 80 to 100 batteries, the bigger batteries, out of our plant a week. So you can imagine with recovering that many batteries, there's potential for fires, and we do end up having fires. So batteries do not belong in your recycling containers, in your curbside recycling, or in your trash.
However, they can go, Amy, to your favorite place. What is that?
My favorite place is the household hazardous waste facility, or the drop-off facility. So they can go to that location. There's other businesses that will accept them, like Lowe's. Batteries Plus will take your alkaline batteries. I'm not for sure about all different types of batteries, but you can definitely take them to our SWACO's permanent household hazardous waste location.
That's great. Thank you. That is probably your best option. And batteries, you should not store that. They do have a risk of causing a fire if they're stored together. And so best practice is, in fact, to tape the ends just to prevent them from connecting each other and creating a closed circuit. I've got a good question here. Any location open for food scraps? I live in a condo, so I can't have backyard composting. That's probably an Amy question.
Yeah, so there are actually a couple commercial services that you could look into if you're interested in having your food scraps picked up via a 5-gallon pickle bucket. It's not really a pickle bucket, it's a bucket, but you pay a fee. There's a couple different companies here in Columbus that you could partner with, and they would pick up your food scraps. So we have Kids That Compost. They're a nonprofit organization that really focuses on empowering kids and educating them about the importance of composting and making something beneficial out of the food scraps instead of sending them to the landfill. And so kidsthatcompost.org, I want to say, is the email address. And then the other business you could look into is the Compost Exchange. They will also provide curbside pickup for compostable materials, your food scraps. And then both of these programs allow you to compost meat and dairy products as well, which you would not be able to do in your backyard composting bin. So it's pretty cool that you can compost even more, but it does come with a cost, a small fee to participate in that service.
Thank you, Amy. I want to mention a couple other compost options for folks. You live in the cities of Worthington, Dublin, Upper Arlington. Hilliard is in the process of establishing one as well. So a handful of communities have established free composting drop-off locations for their residents. And I was answering a question while you were talking, so I might be repeating what you said. But if you live in some of these communities, they actually, it's very similar to a recycling drop-off. It's kind of a similar process. You keep your food scraps at home. You take them to that drop-off when your bucket is full. So email us at info@swaco.org. We can identify the definitive list of those communities. Let me see, there was a good question here. See if I can find it. We're getting so many, I'm having trouble keeping up with them. Oh, you know what? I've got a comment from EJ Evans. It's actually not a question. I'm going to make a comment. He talks about how he has been recycling some materials for many, many years that he's just learned shouldn't go into his curbside bin, and he's wondering when that happened. What I will say, EJ, is this: things have changed a little bit over the years, and they continue to change. So it's easy to make one of those mistakes. When I give a presentation, sometimes when I tell people that yogurt containers are not the right kind of plastic, they get very upset. You're in good company. You're doing your best, and that's okay. We're really glad that you joined us today to learn a little bit more. Get on our website, recycleright.org. There's all kinds of great information. And that does remind me of this other important question, Amy. You had talked earlier about recycleright.org search engine. I have a question here from somebody wanting to know where can they take their TV. At the very least, let's make sure they know where to go to get that information.
Absolutely. So if you have anything that you know doesn't belong in your recycling bin, and you're pretty sure it doesn't go in the trash can, please go to recycleright.org. There is a list of about 60 different types of materials. This includes TVs, appliances, propane tanks, all sorts of things. And you can click on the icon of the material that you are looking to safely dispose of, and it'll pop up with a map. Type in your zip code, and then it will display on a map all the closest locations that you can take that particular item to. So when it comes to TVs, sometimes places like Best Buy, we'll take them to recycle them. If it's in good working order, we always recommend you donate your TV. Goodwill, will Goodwill accept TVs, Andrew? I think they do if they're in good working order.
You need to call ahead because it depends on the location. But some of the older ones they may not, some of the newer ones they may. I have another good question here for Guyana. The question is from Terry Luttrell. He wants to know, will you take shredded paper?
Yeah, so we can accept shredded paper, but it must be in a clear bag, and it can only be shredded paper. That is the only exception we make for bags in our facility. We don't want bags of any kind, but clear bags with shredded paper only we will accept.
Thank you. Kind of a similar question. I'll try to cover this one. Laura Darcy asks about recycling paper that has private information on it. There are a couple of different ways that can be handled. You can shred it and you can put it in your curbside program, as you've indicated. There are some places like some of the UPS stores and things like that have a shredding service. So if you just keep your personal information up a couple of times a year, if you go into there, they've got a service where they'll shred it. And then you can even just do some simple things like take a Sharpie and just mark out some of that personal information as well. Well, I want to thank everybody. We're kind of running up on our time. Our questions, you've had great questions. They're trickling down here. Let me see up, but now as soon as I say that, I get a couple more. So let me just take a quick glance here. So yeah, I will mention a couple of things. So there are a lot of interesting little, what we would call niche recycling opportunities. Rita has mentioned that Whole Foods has a program where they'll accept corks to be recycled. And they also have a small location where you can take number 5 plastics. That's true. There are a couple other organizations that if you get on that search engine we talked about, you might find some other opportunities that you were not aware of. And then I've got a question here from somebody who lives outside of Franklin County, but they do have Rumpke for service. And so Diane, if you could answer that question about Rumpke service in other areas of Ohio.
Sure. So Rumpke accepts the same type of material in all of our service locations. So those 5 categories that we mentioned will be the same categories of material that you want to recycle. Additionally, if you have any questions or if you're not sure, we encourage you to visit rumpke.com. We have information on recycling, the proper recycling guidelines, and also you can always ask us a question if you're not sure. Take a picture and send it to us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I've got one more question here, and it is one that we'll receive periodically. Somebody says, if I have a Clorox container or something like that, can it still be recycled? I'm going to take a shot at it. Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, but as long as they rinse it out well, the Clorox container from their laundry room, I believe that would be acceptable in your curbside program. Why don't you?
Yeah, that's perfect. You're absolutely right. If you just rinse it out, we'll gladly take it. Now, containers for things like pool chemicals or hazardous chemicals we can't accept, but you guys will take them.
That is correct. That is correct. I'm going to answer just a couple more here, folks. We've got somebody from Lucas County. We've got people from all over Ohio, apparently. So we're in Lucas County. It's Terry Luttrell. He says, do we have an organization like SWACO? You do indeed. It's the Lucas County Solid Waste Management District. Terry, if you have any trouble, just Google search that. You should find it. If you have any trouble at all, email us at info@swaco.org and we'll send you the link to their website. And says, I live in Clintonville in a condo and our recycling dumpster says Republic. Do you know where it's going? And so I will say this, Rumpke receives most of the residential recycling in Franklin County, but there are other service providers in Franklin County. So there are other companies, companies that do collect recyclables. Some of them process them themselves. Some of them take them to Rumpke. So there's a little bit of a network here in Franklin County in terms of service providers. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up here, folks. We really have enjoyed your engagement. Really appreciate it. I will remind you of just one final issue, which is that when we end the presentation tonight, you're going to get a little pop-up window that has a survey. We would love for you to take just a minute or two, provide some feedback to us so we can improve these presentations in the future. And you'll also get a follow-up email that'll also have a link to that. So we would love for you to provide us some feedback. We've enjoyed having you. As I mentioned, we've got a lot more coming of these webinars, so I hope you'll join us for some other topics. We are very active on social media, so this last slide has our Twitter hashtag and our Facebook page and our Instagram, and it also has Rumpke's as well. So please follow us, share, like, ask us questions. We'd be happy to answer them. Have a good evening. Thanks, folks.